Hi there, it's Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder here with my top 10 list of cards that I want to brew with from Ikoria. Now keep in mind this isn't the most powerful cards from the set. These are just cards that I particularly enjoy and want to brew with. Now, a little bit of a letdown here. I'm late to the party. Usually I try to put out these lists before the cards go in action. However, with all of the nonsense going on and with this being released on Arena and MTGO before paper, some of these cards from my top 10 list have already made tier 1 decks. So usually I try to pick more, wonky cards, more jank cards rather than the most powerful cards. But it seems like this set is having the power creep of the jank cards is quite substantial. That most of these cards have already actually been broken. But I'm too lazy to make a new list. These are the cards that caught my eye when I read over the spoiler. And although you might have seen some of these, like I said, in top tier decks, I'm still going to talk about them and why I originally thought that they'd make good brew around or build around cards. So I try to make these lists every time a new set comes out, and we'll have one with the next set as well, and hopefully I'll get that one out in time. But without further ado, let's get to my Ikoria Lair of Behemoths top 10 cards that I want to brew with. So coming at number 10 is the Serrated Scorpion. So this card I thought was particularly good for Pauper. I did see that it could be a card in Standard. It has sort of like a Aristocrats feel. You could run this in like a Johnny's Pride Meets Aristocrats deck or with the reanimation type strategies. And Serrated Scorpion is just a really good card right now to stop mono red. It not only favorably blocks the elemental that does a damage when it attacks, but also favorably blocks the knight. So Serrated Scorpion, when it does finally get killed like a Bone Crusher Giant or a Shock, will at least negate that, and you'll gain 2 life off of the Serrated Scorpion going to the graveyard. However, this card is seeing play in the various black aristocrat type strategies. We'll talk about the card that's enabling that as my top 10 list goes on. But I really thought that this card could actually make mono black aggro or kind of mono black aristocrats type strategy work in Pauper. Now, Golgari graveyard type strategies are a strategy in Pauper, but they're really missing a card that has some recurring value and it can actually leech life. This is one of the better ones ever printed. We've seen this as a 1 damage before for 1, but we've never seen it with a 2 damage as well as having the 2 toughness. So this is one of those cards that's been pushed to the point where I actually think that it is playable in these type of strategies and will be slotted in more and more of these type of like aggro-based strategies with mono black or the graveyard recursion-based strategies, and very, very excited to brew around these Serrated Scorpions in the Pauper format. On to my number 9. Number 9 is the Dash Octopus. Now, this card is everywhere in Standard right now. It is now being slotted in the blue-green flash, the blue-red flash, as well as the blue-black flash. And I chose this one for 2 reasons. First, I did like the flash tribal mechanic from the set. We have a various amount of cards. Off the top of my head, I can think of like 4 that are really good flash cards that work in the black-blue flash archetype from Ikoria. This just seems to be one of the better mutate cards too, with a mutate cost of 2. Now, mutate wants to be mutated multiple times on the same creature to get the most effect for the creature, say, when this card mutates. And there are only a few cards that actually have that mutate too with such a huge plus upside. So Dash Octopus is going to go in both those strategies of both the mutate based decks and the flash based decks. And if you are a longtime fan of the channel, you know that any of the Stealer of Secret type cards are catnip to me. I love these tempo-based strategies. Basically, that's the whenever this creature deals combat damage to player, draw a card. Have this on flash, and as well as have this on a mutate to upgrade a 1-drop into a Dash Octopus. The good thing about this too is if they kill the card that you're trying to mutate onto before it actually comes out, it will still come down as a 2/2. I don't know why they do that, but if they bounce the card, they both come back to your hand. So if this was like an enchantment where you just lose the enchantment, it's kind of card disadvantage at that point. You don't want to be 2 for 1. Whereas this is going to be harder to 2 for 1. Yes, damage and destruction will still 2 for 1 you, but bouncing and other ways are not going to be as horrible as if this was like an enchantment. So I think the Sea Dash Octopus is going to see a lot of play in like the blue-white flyer strategy. I could see them running this instead of the enchantment right now. I could also see this, of course, in mutate decks, and it's definitely going to find home in blue-red flash, blue-green flash, and whatnot. It's the perfect card for those decks to continue to draw cards. Teferi's still in the format, so it's not going to shine as much as it could until Teferi's out of the format. Once Teferi is out of the format, I think this card is going to be a powerhouse and a good build around me card. Alrighty, so on it to my number 8. My number 8 is the Drannith Stinger. Actually, this isn't really Drannith Stinger. This is just a bunch of these Cycling 1 cards. This is my favorite out of the bunch because it has the better payoff of when you actually get this card back. So my theory is that the Cycling 1 cards are very, very underrated. So Cycling 2 is double the mana of Cycling 1. And I don't see how people don't get that. Like, when you evaluate a card with Cycling 2, that is double the cost. Literally double the cost of a Cycling 1. And Cycling 1's where you want to be with being able to hold up mana and still do things and just ditch this card at the end of the turn. It's kind of like trying to compare Opt with Anticipate, where Anticipate actually goes through more cards, but Opt sees way more play and does not nearly as much as Anticipate does just because of that difference in 1 mana. I think Cycling you need to evaluate the exact same way. And what I'm liking with the Drannith Stinger is like in like a Rally the Ancestors or Return of the Ranks or Immortal Servitude type strategy where you're going to cycle a bunch of cards into the graveyard and then use Immortal Servitude, Rally the Ancestors, Return of the Ranks, bring them all back. And a card like Drannith Stinger, if you have any of their cycling cards left in your hand, you cycle them and you're going to be able to get damage off of the activated ability. I don't know if that's going to end up being as relevant as just having a Cycling 1 card, but I think all of the Cycling 1 cards are very, very underrated at the moment. They help thin the deck. They help trigger off discard. They help trigger off draw, which both of those right now are cards that we have some cards that actually work off those. So there's a Minotaur. Whenever you discard a card, it does what does it do? Damage or 2 damage? Can't remember exactly what it does. And there's also a lot of the cards that when you draw your second card or when you draw a card, it does something. So Cycling 1 is a very good payoff for that. And I'm really liking this on a creature that then if it reads the graveyard, things like Tarmogoyfs, it's a creature in the graveyard, and things in Pioneer like, not Threshold, but Delirium. Speaking of Threshold, it does work off Threshold. This gives you food for Euros. I think that this card, it's just a matter of time before people actually see the power of having a 1-mana cycler that's just a bear with, basically they could wipe away the text, and I still think this would be very, very playable. So again, not necessarily Drannith Stinger, it's all of the cards that kind of fit in this archetype of the generic Cycling 1 that I want to build a deck around. All right, so on to my number 7. Number 7 is Escape Protocol, so we're keeping with the cycling theme here. So Escape Protocol is a 2-mana enchantment. Whenever you cycle a card, you may pay 1. And when you do, exile target artifact or creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under owner's control. So, of course, I'm seeing some Thassa shenanigans with this card, the Thassa's Oracle, and the new companion. When it enters the battlefield, you both players mill a top 4 and bring back an even creature. I'm actually thinking about building a deck around that particular card in Escape Protocol and then just using it like crazy to cycle and flicker until you have enough devotion on board for Thassa's Oracle. Now, there's plenty of other decks that are going around that are very similar to that, but I don't think anyone's actually used the Escape Protocol route, which I do think is something that could work because it is 2 mana, so it's an even mana cost card. So you could actually just still use the companion as your companion, not really have to worry about it being in your 60. And then there are quite a few Cycling 1s that are even cost cards too. There's one that draws 4 cards for 6 mana that you can just cycle away for 1. Those type of cards I think are going to work very well as Escape Protocol. However, the card that I really want to break with Escape Protocol is going to be Scholar of the Ages. So Scholar of the Ages states when it enters the battlefield, return up to 2 target instant sorcery cards from your grave to your hand. So you get the card that you're cycling to flicker Scholar of the Ages, and then you get back any other instant sorcery. So then if you have another cycler, you can cycle it to maybe flicker your Agent of Treachery or your Cavalier or something where you're going to get tons of value off of 2 mana. So it's going to require the 2 mana to cycle for Scholar of the Ages to flicker. You still get to draw a card off that, mind you, as well as the 1 to pay for the Escape Protocol. So that's the combo that I'm going to try to get to work with Escape Protocol. Who knows if it'll actually work, but it is an interesting little combination from Ikoria. All right, so moving on to the next card. The next card is going to be the Stormwild Caprador. So these type of cards I've always enjoyed that get some sort of benefit off of non-creature based damage or non-combat. Actually, that's actually quite relevant because you can actually give the Stormwild Caprador the ability to fight things, and then it will actually get a lot of +1/+1 counters on it. So there are quite a few ways to actually build this card. The green-white fight seems pretty interesting. Red actually got some fight cards, so you can throw fight in just by running red-white, which makes it interesting with this bad boy with Feather. So Feather the Redeemed and the Stormwild Caprador is a deck that I want to try to build around. So you can run cards like Deafening Clarion in the mix. You can run, like I said, that red fight card. There are plenty of ways to just use damage that would be done to creatures. So anything like a shock or even a lava coil, if you just need to actually pump up. I mean, lava coil at that point is gets target creature gets 4+1/+1 counters on it, which is pretty good. People have said that Bone Crusher Giant exists in this format, but Bone Crusher Giant actually can't kill the Stormwild Caprador outright. So there is that's keeping it back, but they have to hold up mana for it. They have to have more damage on it. And I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue with the Stormwild Caprador. So again, that's kind of theory. The feather and Stormwild seems kind of fun. Deafening Clarion doesn't kill either one of them. Then you can start using, so instead of going like a heroic tempo-based strategy or aggro-based strategy, you go into a feather control strategy. Like I said, later on in the game, your lava coils end up just progressively pumping up your Stormwild Caprador with this sort of combo of then returning it back to your hand. So that will be a deck that I will try to brew, and I will try to actually get to those decks. I know I make top 10 lists all the time, like I'm going to build these decks and I never get around to it. Usually because I become salty after the first couple ones don't work the way I want them to. Keep me to it. Keep me to my word. I'm going to build around these cards. I already have one of the cards on this list built and ready to go, and we'll continue. I want to get back to the jank. I've been obsessed with hitting that mythic rating and really trying to find like a deck that works. Standard's ruined. I don't think this set helps Standard at all. In fact, I think it makes it worse. It's more non-interactive wombo combo type stuff that's already going around week 1, and we still have the Embercleave and Teferi problem. So might as well enjoy trying to win with jank rather than trying to go all the way to mythic. So we're gonna stick in gold and play some wonky brews on arena, and then maybe we can actually hit modern and pauper and all those good stuff. So again, hold me to it. I'll try to be building these jank decks. All right, on to my number 5. My number 5 is Adaro, Wandering Monster. Now, this card is actually seeing play like crazy in a Jeskai control-based deck. So basically, they've taken away like Dream Trawler and used Adaro as the win condition, because the Adaro actually does a lot of the grindy, like you're cycling. There's 4 times cycling it. You're basically paying its converted mana cost and still drawing cards while you're doing this. And then you eventually will get out the 8/8 Haste Trample. Now this can have Pseudo Flash to it. And speaking of which, going before, the cycling still does trigger that draw and discard. So you can like run in the Improbable Alliances or any other thing that works off of drawing multiple cards to trigger something, and still get that drawing the card out of the Adaro before it cycles back into your deck. And this is just a looming 8/8 with Trample and Haste. Can go finish it off. So with a bunch of 1/1 fairies, and then a turtle, a hasty turtle that comes down, and then even mix in Embercleave that gets reduced by all of those fairies attacking in as well. I think that this makes for a pretty good shell, pun intended, of a deck. And it's like I said, it already has seen play in these Jeskai decks just as a finisher. It's not hard to keep up, Ionize mana or absorb mana. Then if they don't cast anything, you just cycle this away, draw a card, and eventually when you cycle it for your 4th time, you get this 8/8 beater. Or they try to attack in, you cycle it in, you kill a blocker, and then get an attack in. What's really good about this too is if it does go to the graveyard, then you can always get it back with your Elspeth. Conquer's Death. It's a great target to bring back. Or you can always just get it back with cycling another. You won't get it back, but you get the other one that comes out of your deck with cycling another copy of Adaro. It doesn't really care how many copies you have. You can always just cycle it away. So I really like this card as, of course, in those control-based shells, but also for these either the discard-based decks or the draw-based decks. I think it's going to be the perfect card for those particular decks. All right, also, before I get in trouble, this is Tyler and Scrawn's Bad Brew card. So it's something we do over at Rogue Deck Builders. We have a contest going on of anyone that wants to participate. They usually try to pick a bad card and brew around it. Well, both Scrawn and Tyler are off their rocker if they thought this was going to be eligible for a bad brew, because this card is not bad. It's very, very good, but it is a card they chose after the set was spoiled to be the Bad Brew build around card. So if you're interested in building a deck with Adaro, you can go and sign up for that competition that Scrawn and Tyler hold, and we usually post it up on the website. I'll try to put a updated link in the description. Alrighty, on to the next one. The next one is Zirda, the Dawnwaker. This one I'm very excited to build around. I think it's got a very, very relevant ability, and it doesn't necessarily need to be your companion. So the thing is with Zirda is activated abilities that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate, so it's training grounds on a creature. And if all of your permanent cards have an activated ability, it can be your companion. Where I think that this this card actually does shine is in like a flicker-based strategy with Eldrazi Displacer, where Eldrazi Displacer's reduction gets down to 1, and you can flicker things like crazy. There's a lot of infinites at that point that then can be had that generate mana. It's hard to generate white mana, I should say, but there is some ways you can actually continue to generate that white mana and then be able to just continue to flicker, and get a lot of activated ability, or a lot of enter the battlefield effects. But activated abilities are pretty strong on artifacts. I think the Zirda, the Dawnwaker, might make like an Ugin deck and a Karn deck actually worthwhile. Both of those have activated abilities because they're planeswalkers, and then you can get just a bunch of artifacts that can have their activated abilities reduced. See, the ones that have like really, really high activation costs of like 3 or above get down to 1 or 2 or 3. That makes them a lot more appealing to use their activated abilities. So that's another route you could go with Zirda. But the route that I really want to go is this Jank Wombo combo. So this is Jegantha, the Wellspring, plus High Alert, plus Zirda, the Dawnwaker. So yes, very, very tough to get off. And you can't use Jegantha as the companion because the Zirda has 2 of the same mana symbols in its casting cost. However, Zirda can be used as your companion because High Alert does have an activated ability, and Jegantha does have an activated ability. And once this is out, it reduces the abilities. So yeah, it doesn't say artifacts, it's just abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 less to activate. So it makes High Alert's ability cost 1 white and a blue to then untap a creature. So then you'll untap Jegantha. Jegantha is going to tap and add the mana again to your mana pool, and you're going to be netting up a ton of mana every time you do it. Now, this combo does just work by itself without Zirda, but Zirda really ramps it up to where you can have more. I guess you could just go infinite mana anyway with Jegantha and High Alert, but this in the same deck with other activated abilities that require untapping creatures. There are a bunch of the guild mages that have some pretty interesting abilities that have high activation costs and tapping them. So then you can untap them with the High Alert for just 2 mana and then hopefully redo them. And like I said, there's quite a few of the good guild mages from Ravnica Allegiance and Guild of Ravnica. And if you actually go back in the my old friend of mine, Morton, who actually was the father of Skred, has created a combo deck with Zirda the Dawnwaker and the Izzet Guild Mage in a Storm Shell that just goes infinite quite quickly with the combo of the two. And off to showcase that deck, it's using Manamorphose to then, the Izzet Guild Mage is going to copy Manamorphose, and then it goes infinite mana, and you draw out your entire deck when you have the Zirda Dawnwaker, the Izzet Guild Mage, and Manamorphose. So we'll showcase that deck. It is kind of a glass cannon shell, but it's actually more resilient than you'd think when I've actually been toying around and goldfishing with it. So don't want to steal any of Morton's thunder if he wants to actually showcase that deck before it goes public or not. But keep on the lookout. Usually the decks that Morton brews end up being phenomenal. He is a master brewer. Like I said, he was one of the very first people to really pilot Skred to a phenomenal rating on MTGO, and I really, really think his brews are just on the next level. Alrighty, so on to the next one, which is the Death's Oasis. Death's Oasis is a 3-mana enchantment, and whenever a non-token creature you control dies, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, then return a creature card with less converted mana cost. Then the creature died from your graveyard to your hand, and then you can sacrifice Death's Oasis, gain life equal to the converted mana cost of creatures you control. That's okay. What we're really seeing this is just the ability to continue to recycle through cards. Now, there are already some interesting combos with Death's Oasis with cards that generate mana when they come into play. There's also in standard going into like Plaguecrafter. Plaguecrafter kills itself. It can go get back 2 mana card back to your hand, and then you can cast that 2 mana card to then get back a 1-drop when it dies. The 1-drop has some sort of effect. If you go back to the Scorpion, there's a nice little cycling combination you have. You can actually even put in a 0-drop at that point, like we have a decent one in standard, or in Pioneer you have Walking Ballista, and it's a pretty neat little ability just to continue to get a bunch of value out of all of your creatures that die. I mean, the higher the converted mana cost goes, the more and more of the chain you can actually chain. Now, what actually makes this even more interesting is if we go into an artifact strategy and reduce the cost of creatures, you almost have like a Crackland Ironworks type combination that can happen with Death's Oasis. So if you can reduce the cards, so say you have an Ugin out that reduces the converted mana cost of your cards by 2, you can cast your 2-drop. At that point, if you have the card that gets back an artifact when it dies, the Mere Retriever, I believe it is, to get back another card, it's a rinse and repeat over and over to your heart's content, getting back your 1-drop, then your 0-drop, and then casting them all over again. And sack, cast, and at that point you just win the game. So Death's Oasis, I think, has a lot of synergy with the artifacts type of strategy, but there's many other Aristocrats-based shells that can do some pretty wonky stuff, or at least value. So I definitely want to test out this card and see if I can get it to work. It also has a pretty good synergy with the little mini birthing pod card that exists in Standard at the moment with the 2-drop that was just spoiled. Alrighty, so now on to my number 2. My number 2 is the Loras of the Dream Den. I'm actually not going to talk too much about Loras because Loras is mainstream. In fact, this card is probably seeing more play than any other card in Standard at the moment. Loras is going in, people are running it in Ajani's Pridemate decks to keep getting back the unblockable ability to make your Ajani's Pridemates unblockable over and over again. You have to sacrifice Hilo at that point, but I've actually just seen this in the 60 rather than in the sideboard as a companion. Where this is really shining is the Rakdos Sacrifice strategy. If you actually read Loras, it doesn't say each card, it just says each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less. So you can actually run things like Gruesome, is it called Gruesome Menagerie, I think is what it's called? Or there's a new one that just came out of this set where you get to return 2 creatures with converted mana cost, up to 2 creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less. So it's a way to get Loras back from the graveyard if it went from your engine from your main into the graveyard. And there are other few ways actually to still reanimate it. You can still run the enchantment, the flash enchantment from Theros to get it back, and then you can actually cast that after you scry that away. And so Loras is going in a many different decks. There's a black-white enchantment deck that's running just the all the glitters with Loras. I've actually seen this in a green-black shell to just utilize a bunch of like the Glowspore Shaman that comes in, mills a bunch of cards, and then you mill, and then you have a lot of things you can then cast and just get the Witch's Oven type combinations, you name it. This card is very strong, and people beat me to the punch. So not really a rogue card anymore. It just is catnip, pun intended, for a player like me when my favorite strategy in Magic is definitely just value grinding out your opponent, and this is the perfect grindy card. So Loras, maybe we'll find some interesting ways to brew around this in Pioneer, in Modern, and whatnot. I don't know. I could actually see companions getting banned in non-standard formats. They're just really obnoxious. A lot of people complaining about them just adding an additional card to Magic the Gathering. To now you start with an 8-card hand rather than a and it's just, there's a lot of cards. It's just, there's no point but to use this. People are talking about how you should use this in Death Shadow because the only cards that are converted mana cost above 2 in Death Shadow are going to be instants or sorceries. And so And even at that point, sometimes they didn't run it, so it's just throw it in. Might as well throw it in. And yeah, a lot of people are not happy with companions, and I pretty much share their sentiment. But this one's a pretty cool brew around card. All right, so on it to my number one. My number one and my most excited card to build around from this set is none other than Arboreal Grazer. Wait a second. That's not from this set. You are correct. Arboreal Grazer is from War of the Spark. I chose this because this is just an ode to mutate cards. I think this is the best card for mutate. It comes out, it ramps you into those bigger mutate cards, and most of them synergize quite well with Arboreal Grazer. So whether it be the big beater, the 6/6 trampler, that you can cast from your graveyard, you're ramping into that, and then you'll be able to turn the Arboreal Grazer into it. There's also the other the Teamer one that could go well, or the Abzan one that could go well with the Arboreal Grazer, because one of their problems is their mutate costs are quite steep. So not only do you need a creature out, but you need to ramp to get to those mutates to get their effects they need to have in standard. So there's no card right now that currently really does that, and that's where Arboreal Grazer just really shines. It gives you that body to mutate into, and also ramps you towards getting those out a turn earlier. So I'm going to be running many different mutate base decks with Arboreal Grazers to see if we can find a good mix of those mutate cards. Really looking at the Teamer one right now that gets a permanent from the top of your library, because it's also in like a ramp-based strategy, and hopefully we can bust this card wide open in the Mutate Tribal. A lot of people are running Mutate right now in various decks, but not really in a full Tribal of Mutate. So Arboreal Grazer, we're looking at you to really be the key card in those particular strategies. Anyway, kind of a long-winded one this time around for my top 10 list. There you have it again for the top 10 cards. We have the Serrated Scorpion, the Sea Dasher Octopus, the Drannith Stinger, the Escape Protocol, Stormwild Caprador, Adaro Wandering Monster, Zerda the Dawn Waker, Des Oasis, Loras, and Arboreal Grazer as an ode to all the Mutate cards. Hope you enjoyed this video, and see me on Arena trying to brew these decks. Maybe we'll check out MT Joe, and we'll have another edition of our top 10 cards I want to brew around, with bringing in some of the other personalities from the Rogue Deck Builder universe, bringing in like Scrawn and Arya, possibly Tasty Snackies and Coach for their favorite cards, and we'll have a discussion about these cards. So we're going to bring the brews back. I know I always say that. We're getting there. We're getting everything settled with this pandemic kind of winding down. Hopefully we can start focusing again back on our roots. Hope you enjoyed this video. Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.